This is Lawrence Lane, and for today's interview with Linda Anne Hutchison, I remain close to home in London. Linda Anne joined the D'Oyly Carte Chorus in 1969, but was quickly promoted to principal soprano the following year. Linda Anne stayed with the company for 4 years, leaving in 1973. Thank you for agreeing to meet up for a chat. This conversation is important to me as you were my first Elsie, Josephine, Constance, Phyllis and Gianetta. Am I right in thinking that you auditioned for the D'Oyly Carte on more than one occasion?
Well, yes, apparently so, although I didn't realise that until Tony Joseph actually told me so.
Oh, right.
It happened that when I was studying at Guildhall, they would often tell us, oh, go and audition, there are auditions going on in West End, and so we would all just take ourselves off, and apparently one of those was for the D'Oyly Carte,
Right.
although I have to be honest and say I don't remember it.
No.
The other one that I went off for from there was they wanted a 15-year-old girl, looking like 15 years old, and we turned up and I walked on stage. I think at that time I was about 17, I might have just been 18, and I walked on stage, and from the depth of the theatre a voice shouted, "To mature, next." So that was during Guildhall. We went off to do these, and apparently one was for the D'Oyly Carte, but I must put my hand on my heart and say I didn't realise so.
No, I suppose it's just really taking the opportunities as they arise,
Yes.
without necessarily thinking about what the company was.
Absolutely.
Yes. So, did you have any knowledge of Gilbert and Sullivan before you,
Yes.
got involved with the company?
Yes. As a schoolgirl, I had been asked to sing Belinda in a production of Dido and Aeneas
Right.
at Gordonston School. And there was a housemaster there who was very keen on G&S, and so he asked if I would be interested because he was wanting to do a production of the Mikado. So I was very pleased. I was 14 when I did the Belinda, so I was 15 when I did Yum Yum. I didn't know Gilbert and Sullivan, I'll be honest, because I grew up in the northeast of Scotland and we were a little bit starved. I think we occasionally got Opera for All,
Right.
which gave one a strange sort of idea of what opera was about, since it was a piano and about 3 people. So I didn't know Gilbert and Sullivan, but I did the Mikado, which I enjoyed thoroughly, and then he wanted to do, the next year, he wanted to do HMS Pinafore.
Right.
And so I did Pinafore, and I sang the second act aria twice every night because I got an encore on it.
Oh, wow.
Which shows the sort of innocence of youth and the sort of energy, because that's quite an aria. But that was my contact with G&S.
Right. Then with your second audition, or the one that you knew about, how did that run?
Well, that came about because I was in the finals of the Kathleen Ferrier Scholarship, as it was called then, the Kathleen Ferrier Scholarship. And after it, I didn't win. I was in the last 6, but I didn't actually win it. But I got a letter from Freddie Lloyd inviting me to audition for the company, as he had seen me. He'd been at the finals, because the finals were open in the Wigmore Hall, and invited me to come and sing for them.
All right.
And had asked if I was interested in joining the company.
Oh, so that's quite a privilege then, to be invited to audition,
Yes.
rather than just rocking up and saying, "Can I sing for you, please?"
So, yes, absolutely. So I turned, he said, I was asked to go and sing, and I wasn't sure whether I wanted to do it, and I said I'm not sure. And then it was decided that it might be a good idea. My singing teacher thought it might be quite a good idea, because I'd just met who was to become my husband,
Right.
and she thought it would be better if I was out of London rather than in London. And she said, I think it's a good idea. So I phoned the company and said, I don't know if, whether you're still interested in me. And they said, absolutely.
Oh, excellent.
So.
And I understand, though, that the company management had much difficulty in getting your name correct.
Well, it's been a problem all my life, Lawrence,
Right.
because, well, not all my life, since I came to England, because it's Hutchison, which is the Scottish version, but in England it tends to be Hutchinson. So that extra N creeps in. And even if I spelt it to people carefully, they would say, Hutchinson, no, Hutchison. And when I've been at places and say I'm on faculty or they've given me a badge, nearly always I check, and nearly always they have Hutchinson. But I did do one presentation somewhere and I immediately saw Hutchison was correct. I was really delighted until I saw they'd spelt Linda with a Y.
Oh.
So, but yes, it's just because it's the Scottish and things, and so people tend to put in the extra N.
When you took over the principal parts, you would have had a role model of how the character was intended to be portrayed. However, in 1971, you got to take on a completely new role, that of Constance in The Sorcerer. It must have been great getting to create a role that people wouldn't have seen on the professional stage for some 30 years.
Yes, it was fun to be involved in something like that. Just thinking about the role models of how the character should be, was very strong about, when I did take over the roles, that I wanted to be very clear that the people I was playing were real people. And that was something that I felt I was very serious about, the idea of that. And although there was a lot of talk about how, everything had to be the structure and tradition and all that, I didn't find that, and I found them very open to the idea of allowing me to have the character as I felt. And I think it was one of the things Tony brought up when we were discussing the book, which I liked, was he felt that I made them human beings, not just sort of pretty Victorian ladies. But to do Sorcerer, yes, which was something completely new, it was the whole production. And of course, I got that wonderful outfit with the most gorgeous straw hat, which was designed by Osbert Lancaster, and I had the great fun of having a costume fitting at which he was present.
All right.
And he was very much like, he did a cartoon character, I think was it Lord and Lady Littlehampton or something, and he was very much like them. And he spoke with wonderful Edwardian English, Gales and Balcony and things like that. But I loved that costume, absolutely loved it. It was beautiful. Brown shot silk with broderie anglais and the red velvet sash and that straw hat. And when they were auctioning off the costumes, I did go and I wanted to, I did bid for it, but the prices just got crazy, way beyond what I would pay. And I afterwards, when we were sort of socialising, I was talking to Albert Truelove, and I said, "Oh, I'm so disappointed. I had hoped I might get my costume from somewhere. It wouldn't be my costume by that time, but the costume from Sorcerer." And he said, "Oh, goodness, you should have phoned me up and I would have kept it aside for you." But never mind. I had the pleasure of playing the... But although I must say it was a beautiful costume, but 1971 was it actually? It was done that the actual quality of the materials and everything and touring didn't last quite the way that previous things like the Mikado and things like that had been there for years and years and were still fine.
Yes, because they tended just to stitch a new name.
Yes, that's
in
right.
The costume, didn't they, over the previous incumbent.
Yeah.
Right, so you've talked about the role of Constance, but did you have any other parts that you were particularly fond of, and if so, what made it so enjoyable?
Well, of course, Elsie, because I just love the the drama, and I had a reputation always of being good for doing the jolly and the laughing and being fun. But I suppose it's the clown longing to be Hamlet. And I loved that. And I also, Josephine, because of course it was one I had done as a schoolgirl, so it had that sort of feeling about connecting me to something I had done and introduced me to a new sort of world. So they were really I would say, the two that I really enjoyed doing. Well, when I say enjoyed, I mean Pinafore with Act 2. It's a big sing, and then doing Never Mind the Wine. Therefore, I'm constantly having to sing your verse and sing a top B, whilst nobody was in the least interested, but you still had to do it. So I don't think that was enjoyment particularly, but no, I would pick those two definitely. Yeah.
Did you ever feel that you would like to have done some of the parts that Julia Goss was playing at the time? You say that you had played Yum Yum in the Mikado, so you weren't really given the options of playing in the Mikado or Pirates. Would you have liked to have done those, or were you quite content with the ones that you had?
No, I was very happy with the ones I had, but I was going through, in preparation for you coming, I was having a look through some things I had, and I found a programme for a concert I did in the Free Trade Hall after I'd left the D'Oyly Carte, and in that I sang both Janetta and Casilda, and Mabel.
Right.
And I think the next year I did Yum Yum, so I actually did them.
Yes.
Just not with the company.
No. Did you find that the touring life came easy to you? I've heard some pretty bizarre theatrical dig stories from some of your former colleagues. Do you have any that you can add to that list?
Yes, touring was a funny old business by the time. I mean, I think that in earlier times when they would go on and train as a company and things like that, maybe was slightly different. The curious thing of turning up in a town that you didn't know, having booked accommodation just from a letter that you had read in the prompt corner. And on the whole, I had two regular ones. In Manchester, I had Sid and Ginny, who lived on the road out to Stockport.
Right.
And I learnt a lot from Sid, who got all his history from the News of the World. So we got some very interesting stories. And they came to see me, and this is when I was a principal. But then, whilst I was in Manchester, we were taken round the Granada studios, and I had my photograph taken in the Rover's Return.
Oh.
So when this photograph came, I showed it to Sid and Ginny, and that really, I had arrived, and Sid took it to the building site where he was working to show his mates. Not that I was singing as principal soprano of the D'Oyly Carte, but that I was there in the Rover's Return.
Pulling the pipes.
Yes, I was in that. So they were good. I stayed with them always when we went to Manchester. In Leeds, I stayed with Annie Pawson, who, again, I went there first when I was in the chorus, and she was a lovely Yorkshire woman who had been a cook for some directors, and so her meals she gave us were good meals.
Right.
And on the first time I was staying there with Glenys Grove, she and I shared accommodation. We had said we would have our meal before the evening performance, which was going to be Iolanthe. And so she brought in the first course, which was Yorkshire pudding with gravy, which I'd never come across before, but was told that this is how they ate it in Yorkshire. So I thought, well, that's it. And then she came in with a large plate of roast chicken and roast potatoes and carrots and peas. And so we sort of waded our way through there when she then came in with some pudding and said, and there's cheese. So poor Glenys and I found it very tricky getting into our fairy costumes and getting onto the ground to start. So we had a little chat about we wouldn't have our meal before the evening performance. But through us being there, I got Annie arranged for me to use the church hall so I could do my warm-ups and practice. Right. And she got very interested in us, and so in fact their local church put on some GNS because sort of they got interested, and they put on, apparently they did Pirates, which she said was lovely because of course everyone was sort of post 60, and if they knelt on the ground, there was always quite a long time before anyone could get up again.
I know the feeling. Yes.
But yes, so they did that. So that was good. Otherwise, I had one pretty bad experience, and Will Cowley and I were in Bristol. Do you remember Will Cowley? He was
do. Yes.
The Petiteur assistant conductor, and we got to digs in Bristol. And I think she was a youngish woman who'd fallen in hard times, but it was sort of a mattress on the floor and not very good. So we actually had to find somewhere else. But it was, this curious thing of just turning up in somewhere, a town you didn't know, and going. In Cardiff, I remember turning up, ringing the doorbell, and from deep within I heard this sort of woof, woof, and the door opened a crack, and this woman sort of peered round and said, "You're not afraid of dogs, are you?"
And were you?
Well, no, but I don't wish to upset people, but they're not my first choice.
No.
And it was quite a large boxer dog, who was, one had to tread a little carefully. But I don't remember any, other than the Bristol one, I don't remember any real horror stories. No. I think quite lucky, and I usually shared with someone.
Right. Yes, Peter Riley was saying that it was quite an interesting situation that when the letters came in, that there was this scramble for who was having the letters in, sort of passing them over people's heads to go to the next set of people. So get there first in the line to try and get the best ones.
So that's why going back to the same place like Leeds and Manchester was quite nice if you had somewhere, so you already knew. But yes, they would announce that they were that the letters would be available in the prompt corner, so you all belt down and see what there was. They also said, of course, in those days, some of the landladies had given up offering theatrical digs because there had been the tours of hair and things like that, where I think some illegal substances had been freely used, and so the landladies had decided we were all a rum lot, and so they weren't going to...
These theatricals.
Yes, those theatricals, not to be trusted. Yeah.
A rather delicate question. You must have found it annoying that whilst you played the part of Josephine on stage, then in 1971 the recording of Pinafore was made and the role of Josephine was sung by somebody else.
Well, they did call me in to tell me the situation, which they explained, and it was not their decision. It was the recording company, because apparently there had been some problem with a recording which was a year or two earlier, and they'd not had a very good experience. Right. And so they said that they wanted to decide about who was going to sing it, and as I had just taken over the role, they decided they would go for somebody that they had, who had sort of a track record with them. And so that's how it was explained to me, and so, I accepted that. It's sad in a way that I couldn't have done it, but I quite understood why that decision was made.
It's a shame that no commercial recordings exist of you singing any of the parts that, as I say, you were my first incarnation of a lot of those parts, so it's sad not to have...
There are a few... illicit recordings made, with the and I do have some recordings which have been from a concert since then, but no commercial ones.
No, that's a shame. But in some ways it may have been a blessing, as the recording from a technical point of view was highly criticised because of the special effects and the overall quality of the sound. In fact, it was the only D'Oyly Carte recording not to have been endorsed recorded under the direction of a member of the D'Oyly Carte family.
Oh.
And now we have one of those theatre recordings. This is Linda Anne Hutchison and John Webley with a duet from Iolanthe. One of your former colleagues, unfortunately no longer with us, Geoffrey Cresswell, is quoted as saying that you had a wicked sense of humour. Are there any japes that you can share with us?
No, I wasn't. I'm not a jape type.
Right.
The humour is verbal.
Right.
Yes. So, and it's very much of the moment of what's going on or what somebody said or, yeah.
All right, so the quick response
Yes.
to something that was said or
that's right.
happened.
Yeah,
Right.
because I should say and just go all po-faced and say that I don't like messing around on stage at
No.
all. Not during performances. I don't think that's on.
No, people have paid money to come and see the show.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
you need to think of them first.
Yes.
In a similar vein, can you think of any major on-stage mishap?
Well, on-stage mishap, I have two things from Pinafore. One was when we had one of our stage hands, very sweet man, but not entirely reliable. And he had omitted to put the gun on the stage for Ray Frackstraw in Pinafore. So I was asked if I would carry it in my rose basket, for my first Sorry Her Lot, and somehow managed to get it behind the forecastle or whatever, the bit in the, sorry.
I know the bit you mean, I don't know what it's called.
And so I did. It was very heavy. I was carrying this basket of roses, and I think if I remember rightly, I did put the basket of roses down anyway for the second verse. But it was a very strange feeling walking on, because if it had fallen out of the basket, it would definitely have given a different twist to to the story of Pinafore. But that was one which I had to manoeuvre a way of getting the gun on for him. And then in the Act 1 finale, when he is about to shoot himself, I've sort of run up onto whatever the other bit of the upstairs the upstairs of the boat. And I had to run up there, up the ladder, and stand up there and say, I'll stay your hand, I love you. And they had missed out some pins, so the whole thing was incredibly unsteady, and they apparently couldn't get on to do anything about it. So I just had to run up there and hope for the best.
Oh dear.
But I'm glad to say, as you can tell, that I'm still here.
Well, yes.
So those are the two things that I remember for me. Again, the very same sweet man had
no names mentioned.
No, he something had happened about the bouquets, the wedding bouquets for gondoliers. I think that was in Hull, and he went and bought fresh flowers for us, which of course you're not supposed to carry fresh flowers on stage, I suppose, in case shedding, I don't know, for accidents. So he did that, and he also had to get something in Princess Ida for the Merrily Rings luncheon bell in the baskets, and he got bags of crisps, which he didn't actually open. He just put in.
Oh dear.
Which I'm sure we've all seen pictures of Victorian picnics in which they're eating bags of crisps. So yes, he was very sweet, but just didn't have a gift for the job.
Oh dear.
We did have one performance in London, this is going back on misbehaving on stage, and it was actually the company gave a champagne reception between the afternoon and evening show, which seemed not the most sensible thing to do. And
leads to trouble, doesn't it?
Quite a number of people did imbibe, and I can remember on stage that it wasn't quite as ordered as it ought to be.
Oh dear.
Yeah. But otherwise, Taunton, the only thing I remember, and that's not a disaster, it's just that the stage was so small that they couldn't get all the set on, I think, for gondoliers, but when the curtain went up, the audience applauded. They were so thrilled to see. We thought, well, they're obviously not used to to getting the shows, and so when they were just thrilled to see, which was rather nice.
Oh, lovely.
This wasn't a mishap with Patience, but my dresser in London said that her husband was going to come in to see the show, and it was Patience.
Right.
And if you remember the costume that I had, it was a very pretty blue and white striped dress, a pretty blonde wig, quite a nice blonde wig and a little straw hat, but then these terribly thick pink lisle stockings with flat black shoes. And so the next day when I went in, I asked how her husband had enjoyed the show, and she said, well, he liked it, but he was really so impressed that the company, was allowing you as somebody who was obviously disabled to, and I said, well, she said, well, it's the stockings and shoes. He realised there must be something wrong with your legs. So I said, oh dear, no, you can assure him. But yes, and it was. I always thought they were very curious, those stockings and shoes that went with that rather really sort of glamorous outfit.
They were
and then,
a bit lumpy, weren't
yes,
they?
they were really thick. And he thought he was, but he was in total admiration of the company for allowing me the chance.
Oh, wow.
So there you go.
Equality and diversity even then.
Absolutely, even then, yes.
I seem to remember on one occasion you spoke about how particular Dame Bridget was regarding wearing the correct costume. There was something about the shoes in Iolanthe?
Yes, Dame Bridget would pop in sometimes to the show, and afterwards we would get a memo about whatever she had decided. I don't think it ever had anything to do with the singing or the acting, but she had come into a performance of Iolanthe,
Right.
and she had reportedly said that Miss Hutchison's quite a pretty little thing, but that red wig makes her look like an East End barmaid. That was her first comment. Also, she didn't like the shoes. I had yellow shoes, little high heel, and they were pointed and they had bows and they were rather pretty. But she didn't think these shoes were the correct sort, so she ordered shoes which were the same sort of yellow, same height heel, but they were round at the front and no bow. And absolutely, as far as I was concerned, not in the least attractive. And they were not in the least comfortable. However, that was her instruction. But I'm very pleased to say that the wardrobe said, well, don't worry, we'll just keep an eye out, and when we know she's coming in, we'll put out the round-toed ones. But the rest of the time, you can wear your bows, so I did.
Oh, excellent.
And I think we managed never to do it when Dame Bridget came in again.
Yes, because I understand that she often used to appear without prior warning.
That's right.
And would just
sit
there with dark glasses on and a headscarf. And
I don't think the thing is, I don't know whether this is true or not, but I don't think she was really interested in the opera company as such. It was only because of her brother who'd been killed. She was more interested in the hotel.
Yes, she was never really trained for the job, was
No.
she?
And so when she came in, it was always these sort of comments you got. You didn't get any comment about, how well you performed or anything. It was always just something that she was picking up on. Although when we had, I think it was for the Sorcerer, we had a sort of party at the Savoy, and I had a lovely long chat with her, and she was really charming, and we had a very nice time. But that was the only time.
You kindly came as a guest speaker at a tribute concert that I jointly organised in 2023, and you spoke about the strangest place that you had ever sung in E. Gilbert and Sullivan. I know that you've also spoken about this on Saturday Live on Radio 4, but it's such a wonderful story. Could you repeat it now for this audience?
Yes, of course. So, I was pregnant with what we now know as my son, and he decided to come 10 days early and around lunchtime. So we went off to the hospital, which had been very good in giving antenatal care. But I turned up lunchtime and there was no one there. So they said, I found somebody, and they said, what do you want? And I said, well, I'm having a baby. And they said, well, yes, when? And I said, well, I think now, which of course sent them off scurrying. And I was taken in, they had a quick look at me, and they said to my husband, well, you can go and get some lunch, but don't be away too long. And so he did, but they brought me gas and air. So I tried to use this, and I said, I don't think anything, I don't think this is doing anything. And they looked and said, oh no, it's empty. So they said, well, go and get another one. They went off for the cylinder. My husband had come back by this time, and we'd been taught about breathing. If you have contractions, you have to breathe. And of course, being a singer, I sort of knew about breathing. But it's very interesting that in these situations, because it was the first time I'd ever been pregnant, first time I'd experienced a contraction, he said to me, what's this about breathing? Because, of course, naturally all you do is hold your breath instead of breathe. So that was quite helpful. He got me to breathe. But they came back and sort of fiddled with the cylinder, gave me the thing, and I didn't. And I said, I still don't think this is doing very much. And they said, oh, no, it's not attached. So I said, well, let's just, leave
Forget it.
Forget it. I'll just get on with it. So then they decided I was going into to go to the delivery suite. And in those days, they'd only started, I think it was fairly new, about husbands being present. And we'd had this discussion beforehand as to whether Gordon would be present or not. And he'd said, I hope you don't mind, but I don't mind being with you before, but I don't think I'll come in to that. So I'd accepted that. But of course they said, we're going to the delivery now, and they gave him a robe and he put it on. And I said, no, you're not coming. He said, yes, I am. So I was pushed down this corridor, and I was saying, but you said you're not coming. Yes, but I am going to come. But no. And so this went on all the way down, and he did come in. And so nature took its course. I had the baby. And then the doctor had come to tidy me up, I think is the expression. And this was in the heat wave of 19... And the door opened, and this rather, which I think we were allowed to say in those days, rather plump, doctor came in with a great big bushy beard, wearing his white coat, which was open, with shorts, flip-flops, and his stethoscope round his neck. Anyway, I hadn't had any drugs, so I was still, I was chatting away to him, and transpired that he was a GNS fan.
Right.
And not only that, he had been to performances and had seen me on stage.
Right.
Anyway, so I said, well, what's your favourite? Have you got a favourite piece? And so he said, yes, I like British Tar as a Soaring Soul. So I was lying there in this very interesting position with him and at the other end, and we sang a British Tar as a Soaring Soul. I believe people came rushing down and were standing listening outside because they'd never actually heard such a thing from the delivery suite. But as he left, he stood at the door and he looked at me and he said, well, when I saw you on stage, I had no idea I was going to have my own personal spotlight on you, and departed. But that was absolutely, it was, a sort of surreal moment.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's absolutely wonderful. I love hearing that story, so thank you for sharing it again.
Yes. It was a very short sort of version I gave on the radio because it was Saturday morning.
Yes.
And it was, and I thought one had to not go into too much detail.
No.
But hopefully the audience, we should have given a trigger warning, of course,
well,
shouldn't we?
We should have done.
Maybe
yes.
at the front you'll have to say there are.
Yes. I know that you have been and still are a very busy person, so thank you for your time today. What did you get up to after you left the D'Oyly Carte?
Well, once I had left, I was doing freelance work, and that included opera and concert work. I was the soprano in a flute and piano trio,
right.
And my husband, who is pianist and singer, we did duet recitals. He arranged a lot of music for that. I also had met in the baby clinic when I was taking Angus for his 6-week checkup. I met this woman who was there with her daughter who was having her 1-year checkup. Now, having been on tour for a lot of my time, I hadn't known a lot of people around where I was living. And so when I had the baby, it was very much meeting people, and they'd say, what do you do, or whatever, and I'd say a singer, I was a classical singer, and that they weren't sure about that, a lot of them. And this woman turned out to be a musician, so it was lovely.
Right.
And so she was a pianist and flautist, and even more extraordinary was that when got to know her better, she was married to someone who'd been at Guildhall at the same time as me, and I knew him. And so we became friends, and so had a social and a professional life. So we also did quite a number of concerts in which she played the piano, and Gordon and I would sing. And then we did for the Gilbert and Sullivan Society in London, and then we were invited to do it in Manchester. So we had Pauline playing the piano and the flute, Gordon playing the piano and singing, and me playing the piano and singing. So we had quite a sort of mix round. And we ended up with Gordon organised, or I should say arranged, O Dainty Triolet for 6 hands. So the 3 of us sat at the piano and played this version of O Dainty Triolet. And he also did a version of Love is a Plaintive Song with a flute obbligato.
Oh, lovely.
So, yes, so I did concerts and things like that. And it was actually then, we were doing a Gilbert and Son, a gala evening for when the D'Oyly Carte was sort of on the, getting down the slope towards closing. And we did a gala evening to raise money, and as my husband keeps saying, I wonder where that money went. But we did a gala evening, and John Eldon came, and various people to sing.
Yes.
And in fact, Pauline, her husband, the one that I had been at Guildhall with, he conducted it. And after that, somebody approached me and said she was looking for a singing teacher, and she felt that seeing me perform, that I would, she would love to have lessons with me. And I said, but I'm not a teacher. But she sort of insisted on getting in touch and saying, and so I thought, well, maybe I'll try teaching. It might be quite interesting. So I thought, well, actually, I don't know what I do. I sing. Yes. I've been singing. I've been perfectly successful at it. So I thought I really need to. I mean, I enjoyed working, but I knew all I could do was tell her what I thought I did, give her exercises, and if she were to say at any point why, I'd just have to say because I say so, which is not really ideal. So I thought I need to find out more. So this was only intended to be for my own personal development. We have at that time we had in Sidcup the Sidcup Multidisciplinary Voice Clinic, which was one of the first in this country. And so when I say multidisciplinary, it meant there was the laryngologist, who was a voice specialist. There was the speech and language therapist, also a voice specialist. There was a singing teacher, and there was a clinical osteopath. So the idea is that a singer or an actor would turn up, and at that consultation they could be seen, and the whole plan could be developed there. So it's not like you go and see the laryngologist and then say, oh, we think you should go and see them, then you wait for an appointment there, and so it goes on. And so I asked if I could possibly come and sit in to just for my own personal development and to learn. So I turned up, innocently turned up, and I was completely blown away with that session. I have to explain I am a voice junkie, so you have to say, could you please just be quiet? But I am, because I just find it so fascinating. Because as a singer, you are the instrument and the performer. And we are what we call a neuromuscular instrument, and it's an emotional instrument. We're the only one on the planet. And so everything that happens to you will affect your voice directly or indirectly. So it's just extraordinary. And so I was so excited by this, and they very kindly let me be part of the clinic, so purely voluntarily. And so for the next 5 years I went and basically I did what I would call an apprenticeship. just by learning, and it was absolutely fascinating. And through that I understood the whole workings and found myself not at all in the path I was expecting to go. I was still performing,
Right.
but I took on a few more pupils as well. And I developed into being able to do therapy because I understood what had happened, and so I could work with people who had got into vocal problems. And so from there I then went to be the singing advisor at Medway Hospital with a laryngologist who had sort of trained under Tom, who was my mentor, really, the first laryngologist that I did this apprenticeship with. I then went, they asked me at St Bartholomew's Hospital, Barts, and then Sidcup Voice Clinic, the hospital management decided they had no room for it, because a multidisciplinary voice clinic is always sort of a little bit fighting for its life, because they say, well, there are far too many people involved and it's too expensive. But they said, we've no room here, we're reassessing. So they moved to Lewisham. And then Tom retired, and I was invited to, if I would come and be the vocal rehabilitation coach, which I did. And up until then, basically, it was all very much sort of honorary contracts and that. But Tony Amat, one of the consultants there, did a whole business plan, and so I was given a NHS contract. So I have got a permanent NHS contract, and so I'm the vocal rehabilitation coach with the voice clinic, specialist voice clinic, which means I'm in with the consultations, and I run my own clinic twice a month as well, where I give therapy within the NHS to people, singers, actors, anyone who's a voice, who uses their voice. So that's that part of my life. Then I was invited to be on the staff at Guildhall, which is of course where I train. So I'm employed in by the vocal department, but I work in the drama department as well. So I work with the actors and I work with the singers, the classical and the jazz singers. Then I have my own private practice, which I do see people who are just having vocal lessons, but a lot of the people I'm seeing are sent to me as rehabilitation people, as they are. I get reference from different hospitals, different consultants, different speech and language therapists. But I'm a complete voice junkie. I'm so sorry about that. But I can talk for hours about it because I think it's fascinating.
As I said at the beginning, you are a very busy person.
But it's lovely. I mean, it surprises me when I meet people, and of course very often people will say, they don't know you, so what did you used to do? And I say, what do you mean you used to do? And because it comes as a surprise to me that I must apparently be of an age that maybe I shouldn't be doing all these things. Because I don't feel it's extraordinary, which I think most people know, that you feel so young in your head.
Definitely, yes.
And particularly working with students at Guildhall, and you're looking at these young people, and so that's reflecting onto me, and I feel the same age, and then I walk past a mirror and get a horrible shock, because in fact I don't look 20, but there you go.
Oh, that's wonderful, thank you. So, finally, going back to your life with the D'Oyly Carte, what would you say was your happiest memory of being with the company?
I think a happiest memory, I think one of the terrific things is I think it was an incredible training. I feel it's a little bit like rep, you got on and did it. And I think I never had, this is going to sound awful, but I never had an awful lot of tolerance for students when I was a student. And I still can be a little bit thinking, you've got to get out there, there's a real world out there. And I felt that as a student, people didn't have total responsibility, whereas when you get out there, you've got to just get on with it, and you discover how you can get on. So I thought that was terrific. I loved that. There were lots of, I think, I loved being part of a company. Although I sang as a soloist, I love always being in a company, and
I've certainly picked that up from the interviews that I've done in the past about the family atmosphere within the company.
Yes. I mean, so it is. So that was nice, and it was. I mean, we did have fun. It's hard graft having to go on and repeat things, and I can remember, this is terrible, mishaps on stage, I can remember sort of standing, looking up stage and looking at John Eldon and Ailanthus and just saying, what's my next line? Because you just feel that you're doing it all the time. But I think that the friends, and I'm sorry, I was delighted actually through Tony Joseph that I reconnected. I had a sort of connection through Angie and John. Angie and John both I saw and worked with, but with Tony that really brought me back much more into it, and it was lovely. It was like a nice sort of circle. I love shapes, and I love sort of things working out. I always say the old voice is called presbyphonic voice, and so when I'm doing my presentations about sort of anatomy of the voice and things, I always say, when we get to presbyphonic voice, I say, I was born a Presbyterian and I'll die a presbyphonic. I think it's got a nice little sort of circle to it, and that's what I felt in the way I'd been with the GNS, which was the start. The D'Oyly Carte was the start of it all, and then coming back into the sort of family of it was nice. And coming down to your celebration was lovely, because again I met up again with and have been in touch since, and so that was lovely.
Oh, that's good. And Gilbert and Sullivan is such a good training ground, isn't it? Because you need to sing, dance, act, move. It covers all of the theatrical requirements, really, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Very demanding.
Yes.
And that was particularly came true when we were, as a principal, when we were out on tour. Of course, the most you usually did was maybe 3 shows in a run. But then when we came into London, and you did whole week runs, and I remember, I should think possibly my first London, must have been my first London season, because I was at that time still doing The Plaintiff, and we did a 3-week run, and I think it was a 3-week run of Yeoman, of Gondoliers, and then Trial in Pinafore. And I can remember by the 3rd week, between the matinee and evening show and the Saturday, thinking, gosh,
why am I doing this?
Yeah, really quite demanding. But I think it gives such pleasure and fun, which is nice. We can do with a bit more of that, can't we?
Yes, definitely. Well, it was so nice to see you on stage back in 1971 when I first started to get interested in Gilbert and Sullivan, and it's been great to reconnect all those years later in 2024. So thank you so much for spending the time and talking to me about your life and your memories of being with the D'Oyly Carte. So thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence, and thank you for doing something like this, because it's most interesting.
Thank you.